Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. You find the links in the podcast description. I'm also a podcasting coach because I've got 4 other podcasts: meditation, crypto, learn Polish, and awakening, exposing fraud and corruption. And you'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today, he's an author, he's a coach, he's a speaker. Please welcome Clint Hatton. Did I do the surname justice, Chris?
Clint. You got the surname right, but it's Clint. Yeah. You're
Apologies.
good. You're good. How are you, Roy?
I'm not too bad. I was squeezing on my thing because I didn't want to look down there, and I was squeezing on the thing. So, yeah, to be honest with you, I'm just shaking off a cold. So that's why I'm not firing on all cylinders. So I apologize.
Yeah, you're okay. I have been called worse over the course of a lifetime. So we're okay.
So I suppose you might let the listeners know a little bit more about you. I mean, obviously you're an author, speaker, and a coach.
Well, my main focus in life is being a great husband and being a dad. So I've been married almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years in April to my beautiful bride, Amaryllis. And I have 3 boys, one who did pass away and he's already heaven bound. And then I have 2 that are 18 and 13. And so they're my pride and joy. And I live in the Dallas, Texas area. But I've been in this industry, mentoring, coaching, speaking for a little over 20 years. It's been a fun ride. I've had a lot of really interesting experiences. I've had the good fortune of being able to travel quite a bit and even speak in some, different places. I live here, of course, as I said, in Dallas, but I've been to Africa and Central America and, different places. And so it's really, really been a joy. So I love people. I love talking with people. I love doing this. I like talking in front of big groups, but I love the one-on-ones as well. And just looking forward to this conversation.
No, absolutely. So I suppose before we kind of delve into everything you're doing, your kind of speaking journey, like, as you were younger, kind of how it all came about.
Yeah. I was thinking about that before we were getting ready to do this show. And I had actually kind of forgotten about what I guess was probably my first true public speaking experience. When I was in high school, I took a speaking class. That's not what they called it. I just can't remember exactly the title of the class, but it was about being able to speak. And the first couple of go-rounds I had, I didn't do very well. And then what happened was, and this ended up being, I think, not only a huge key for me, but I think it's a huge key for anybody that's going to be speaking in public. I had a speech that I had to give, and I knew I had done so poorly trying to be really almost over polished, over professional, if I could say it that way. And I decided to have fun with it instead. And so I created this kind of crazy speech that really brought out my personality rather than trying to get up in front of people and be someone who I wasn't. And I ended up killing it, ended up getting an A, and, was super excited about the results. And so it was funny. I was thinking about that because I knew you were going to ask me that question. And that was probably one of the first catalysts that I realized, gosh, I kind of like this, but I think being myself was huge. And then really, I didn't really do too much speaking again until I was about roughly 28, 29 years old. I got involved in a direct selling company. It just happened to be nutritional products. But in that company, we did a lot of training. We did a lot of presentations. And again, I had the good fortune of being able to practice that. And I just really loved it and enjoyed it. And so really pretty early on, as far as in my business career, I began to be exposed to speaking. And I think another advantage I had too that was really awesome is a few of the people that I worked with who had been doing it for probably 15, 20 years were just elite speakers, So even though I think it's always important to be yourself, I was able to pick up on and learn a lot of things that they did to draw people in and things like that. So but it started probably around that year in high school when I did my first speech there.
No, excellent. And the nutrition company, just curious, was that like a multi-level marketing? Because
that one was.
Because the reason I say this, there's such a lot of people, that's a pyramid, this. I've been involved in a few of them, and I actually love them for a few reasons. It's irrespective of kind of the product and the selling on, for personal development and for improving your speaking skills. Because I'll tell you how bad I was at speaking. I mean, I'm only 5 years that I got involved with ACN, and a guy from Canada who I met at a different event years previous, he came out and he started, doing the room, and doing. There was people coming to my ex-wife has a school, so we were able to use that. So that was grand, and I was there. I was just listening away and everything. So then I started organizing myself. So the first one I done, nobody came, and my wife at the time said, "Just practice it anyway." And it's like if the room was full, my face contorted. I went into panic mode, and there wasn't one person in the room, and so. Then, like, kind of fast forward, kind of overcame that. But it's like, how they push it for not just speaking, but so many different things, irrespective of the company. They all kind of have that element to it, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, it does have that reputation, the pyramid scheme thing. And in it, of course, there has been some that really kind of were, but I think most are not that way at all. And it's funny you say it that way too, because I did that business for about 5 years, and I ended up moving into other things because I just felt myself pulled in a different direction career-wise. But I still credit to this day, one part of my story that I obviously hadn't shared yet was in my 19 to 20s, late 20s, I had suffered some things when I was a little bit younger and started abusing drugs and alcohol pretty early on. And then in my 20s, even though I was a professional salesperson, I had about a 9-year stretch of doing meth and, some heavy drugs and stuff like that. And so I decided to quit. And so I quit literally cold turkey one morning after doing meth one night. I just didn't want that to be my life anymore. I didn't want to be that kind of person. And it was in that same exact season that I joined this direct selling company. And there's no question, I attribute some of the trainings, a lot of the personal development sides of that business as really putting me on a completely new trajectory. And I think to your point, especially since we're really talking about speaking today, is when you're growing personally, when you're becoming more confident in who you are and where your future is going, I think that's going to lend itself towards helping you, in any kind of speaking environment as well.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned kind of getting into the drugs, and like, it's not a route that I went down, but I was surrounded by that. I kind of grew up in a rough neighborhood, and like, one thing, because I honestly I think nobody should judge anyone, because we don't know their journey, we don't know the actual past and everything, so we should have pure forgiveness for everybody, kind of unconditional love. But one thing, like, a lot of people kind of look at them and go, they're useless and all this, but if you look at them, they're able to organize the money for their drugs, which means they are creative and they have the ability to put that energy into something else. And I don't think they actually realize that at the time, obviously, but the majority of people are able to fund what they're, the drug of choice.
That's a very interesting observation. I've never thought about that way before. Yeah. I mean, they're certainly resourceful, right? And so I think, and you said something, I don't know if we want to go off on a rabbit trail with this, but in my coaching, one of the things that I say over and over and over again, and a lot of my talks, I start with this too, depending on the environment, is I really believe 3 things about every single human being, no matter where they are. I believe they were created to be courageous. I believe courage is already inside of us. Now, we may need help uncovering that. We may need to overcome fears to, use it, but it's in there. And then the second one, which is what you just said, I believe everybody was created with a creative genius, the ability to come up with creative solutions and ideas and problem solve. And so, and the third one's compassionate, but I'd like that second one you just said, because that's very true. even the one who's, I don't know what you think of when you think of someone who uses meth. Where I lived, especially in Northern California during that time of my life, typically you would think of a white guy like me that had a bunch of tattoos, rotted out teeth, and was pushing a bike with his 3 belongings through a park. That's what it looked like where I came from. But you're right. And so everybody has an inherent value in them, right? And sometimes it just takes the right circumstances to pull them out of it. And even though I was a professional salesperson and not, I took care of myself, I still needed people to rally around me and encourage me and, tell me I could be something greater than I was.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So I see in the background, I know it's your book and it's on your website, Big Bold Brave. You might just
Yeah.
tell me how that all came about.
Yeah, it's a heavy, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I had my do not disturb on. I have no idea why that came on there.
Right,
Okay.
cool.
Apologize for that. I'm going to start by just giving you a quick snapshot of my oldest son, because it's a little bit of a heavy story to start out with, but I'll show you how even the toughest things can be redeemed in certain ways. My oldest son, Gabriel, was a very unique young man. I think we all think all of our kids are, of course, and all three of my boys are amazing in their own ways, but he was very determined and very adventurous at a very young age. At 8, he decided he wanted to become a pilot, and he never let go of it. And then by the time he was in high school, through a club that he joined at a local airport really close to where we live here, and then also his high school had a 4-year aviation educational program, which is not typical. And so he was going for it. And at 16, he actually soloed for the first time before he could even legally drive a car here in Texas, which was kind of a strange experience. And then at 17, which is the youngest you can be to get a actual pilot's license, he earned his pilot's license. And so he achieved his initial dream, and he was chasing that dream to become a commercial pilot. And on September 23rd of 2019, he was just training, and he had dropped someone off. He was taking a trip to drop someone off at their school north of us in Arkansas. And on his return trip, he ran into some unexpected weather, and he was going through a mountainous region. And what the NTSB would rule is that he suffered from spatial disorientation. So for the listeners who maybe haven't heard that term, a lot of people know about the helicopter crash with Kobe Bryant, the very famous basketball player. It's same thing that his pilot suffered from, and he crashed and he lost his life. And so, that was a devastating blow to our family. And ultimately what happened was it was news. And so we had a couple of different news networks reach out to us, and one was an NBC Dallas affiliate. And when we were doing the interview, I don't remember saying it, Roy, because that interview was kind of a blur. We were emotionally
I can
just,
totally understand that.
we were in a lot of pain. But in the interview, I said at some point, he lived big, bold, and brave. And so even though I don't remember saying it, what ended up happening is when the segment aired later that night, what she did was she did a beautiful job with the interview. She allowed us to talk about his life, and in our case, we're people of faith, so we talked about our faith and how that played into how we were feeling and all that. And at the end, to sign off on the segment, she said, Gabriel's parents encourage you to live like Gabriel, big, bold, and brave. And so that's where that phrase came from. That's where ultimately my book title came from. That wouldn't happen for a couple of years later. My personal development company is also called Big Bold Brave. None of that would happen for a couple of years. We obviously had to go through some very painful grieving and we still are on many levels. It's only been 3.5 years, but the really, the most painful part of that process is definitely in the first couple of years. But what happened was at first, Roy, it was really just a family mantra. Because on the morning of, if I could share this just quickly,
Of
the
course.
morning of the crash, when I was sitting down with my 2 younger sons, who at that point were 9 and 14, and had to tell them what had happened because they had slept through the night. We went through a hellish night because we knew he disappeared off a radar at about 8 p.m. that night. It was a very long night, Roy, with lots of confusion on the information we were getting on whether or not he was okay, or whether or not they knew if he was okay. And ultimately we got the final call at 3:30 in the morning that he had indeed passed away. And so when they got up that morning, I set them down, and we had to have what I characterize as the impossible conversation. And after giving them the news and allowing them to, respond to that, which they did by, crying and weeping and all the things you would expect. And then when we were done, I said, boys, we have two choices. We can choose to identify with his death, with his tragedy. He died in a tragic plane crash, and all the things that surround that, and all the what ifs. And if we choose to do that, then we are going to be shadows of who we were created to be. If we allow our pain to identify us, then we're going to be trapped in that to some degree our entire lives. And so I said, we have a second choice, and that is, I just gave you kind of a brief glimpse of the fact he was adventurous. I mean, the guitar's behind me. He taught himself to play guitar. He became an amazing photographer. Pretty much, he was just the type of person that if there was something that he wanted to accomplish, you can just consider it done, and it was always about what's next, what's the next adventure, what's the next risk, calculated risk, but what's the next risk I can conquer. And so I said, that's the way he lived his life. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to choose to constantly remind ourselves of the life he lived, not how he died. And so with that, eventually the phrase big, bold, brave just kind of became a point of recalibration for us, because, we didn't do any of this perfectly. When you're grieving, it's a very challenging thing, and you move through many different emotions at different times, sometimes multiple emotions in one day.
Yeah.
And so we did that as a family. We made an agreement that, that was also part of our discussion that morning, is that we were going to allow each other to feel through whatever we need to. You could be angry, you could be sad, you could be whatever you were feeling, and it was all okay. And so that's the compass that we set that morning. And Big Bold Brave just kind of became our family mantra of, if we were having a rough time or whatever, it's like, come on, let's live like Gabriel, big, bold, and brave. And so a couple of years later, I'll get to the book now really quickly. A couple of years later, I knew I would write a book someday, Roy. I wasn't necessarily on any kind of a timetable. But what happened was COVID happened 3 months after he passed away. And so the first year in particular, really 2 years, we not only dealt with the grieving process of losing our son, but there was also the whole world turned upside down. And of course, as you know, the whole world lost in many different ways. People lost loved ones, people lost careers and businesses, and just, you fill in the blanks. There were just so many forms of it. And so that's when I decided, I think now's the time to write the book. And why I did that was it's not just a book on grieving. It does tell part of our story with him and the inspiration of his life, and, the things that we did that are healthy to help you keep moving forward in your life, because you don't move on from losing a loved one. There's a void that's there for the rest of your life. Our lives were changed forever, that morning. But you can do things to move forward. And I just felt like there was so much fear, so much loss, so many people, at least what I felt like I was seeing on social media and hearing, people that just didn't feel like there was hope, and that the whole world was just, going downhill. And granted, of course, there's always negative things going on in the world, but I believe there's a lot of hope. And I believe there's a lot of people like yourself that are doing a lot of very positive things, and, are building towards the future and want to inspire humanity. And so that's what the book Big Bold Brave is all about, and why I decided to write it so soon.
No, beautiful. And I'm thoroughly sorry about your son. And I've looked at a lot of the videos, and what a beautiful child, and like I saw the pictures with the guitar and everything. He, like, on his moped looked extremely cool.
Yeah.
But just you can hear him talking even when he's flying. I don't know who with somebody else, but he was doing all the flying and everything. You've got a load of beautiful stuff, which is actually, I know it's tough that you've lost your son, but the fact that you've got the videos and everything, where sometimes people don't have that, it's something that just kind of, makes the closeness there, like that you always kind of, he's with you. Like.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I'm very grateful, because I mentioned he was a photographer, and I still haven't even come close. I mean, he took thousands of pictures, and unfortunately, he was just shy of 18, so he was still very young in his processes. So he didn't necessarily file or name everything, and so I just every now and then kind of go back in there and try to edit and put names to what the photos are instead of the numbers. But to your point, it's really, for us, it's really beautiful. We love the fact that we have some of those videos. The pictures that you saw with the guitar and the moped, that was actually his senior photos from his senior year of high school. And a friend of ours is a very well-known photographer. She's a Sony artist. For listeners who may not know what that is, that's just you're pretty high level to be a Sony artist. And so she did these family photos for us that are just incredible. But with that, they actually ended up doing something that was the first time they'd ever done it. And we're so grateful for it. There's a video, and I can't remember if I posted this one or not, so I don't know if you saw it. I'll have to go back and look. But it was of him telling a story about an experience that he had with me, and then also another one, an experience he had with his mom. Yeah. And so that was a part of their package that they had never done before. It was a surprise. And of course, how would either one of us ever know that months later he would be gone? And so, to your point, it's just, and I want to encourage, those who really have lost a loved one. I know sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's hard to look at pictures and look at things, and, because some people consider that a trigger that causes you to feel a certain way emotionally. But I would tell you that it's very healthy, and that even if it makes you sad for a temporary amount of time, there's still such a great joy of, and I love the way you said it, that you have this physical thing, this video, this picture that just kind of draws them close to you in those moments. And so thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah. And with the videos, actually, because there's a video at the start. I'm not sure where I saw that, but it's like you're sitting on the chair and and that's done extremely I mean, there's so many things on your website that I haven't seen, because I mean, I've had hundreds of guests on the show and I look at all the websites and everything, but there's a few things. One is that video, but there's also on the store side, you actually kind of welcome people. I've never in my life seen that. And I thought that is so clever, and it's nice because it was a genuine kind of message, just a 30-second little video, but it was fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I need to update that with some new information. But yeah, and excuse me, I think I need a sip of my bulletproof coffee. Thank you for reminding me of the name of it. The reason why I did that, and I'll even back up and say, first of all, I need to give all the credit in the world. I have a few very creative friends that I had a vision for that video that you saw on the couch and all that. I knew what I wanted to see, but I am not techie. I am not the guy that can put that all together. So I was very fortunate. They did a beautiful job of taking the idea I had and creating something really cool out of it. But the welcome video is because, when I launched Big Bold Brave, I am like what we're doing right here. This is a form of collaboration, and we're bringing hopefully some, really positive value to your listeners. And I think for me, that's what the rest of my life is all about. It's not about me inspiring people. As a matter of fact, I love to say it this way because it's how I really feel. My tagline is courageous humans, inspiring lives. So I do public speaking. I've written the book, I do podcast interviews. And so our story is inspiring people. But if that's all it did, I've missed it, because my goal isn't just for people to look at me and go, you're inspiring. It's for them to see themselves in that story and know that their story matters and that they should start living an inspiring life. And so that's why I did the welcome, because I feel like, it's my company, but anything great that's ever going to come out of Big Bold Brave is going to be because of us, because of the community that's built, not because of something about me.
Excellent. And I know that you've done events in small rooms, but you've also done big open events. And I'm curious because it's something I've never done myself, open. And I'm just curious, what have you learned from kind of that experience in an open event? Because that's kind of new. Not everybody gets the opportunity of doing that.
Yeah. And, they're all different, all those settings, because I've spoken. Well, I mean, I've done small enough groups where I've spoken in front of one or two people as well.
Well, that's one or two more than my first meeting.
Yeah. Well, Okay. Hey, to be fair, my first two in that business, nobody was there. So I completely relate to what you're talking about. And actually, before I even get into the open air, because you made that comment about, it was only your former wife, and that, you felt like there was hundreds and you were that nervous. I know everybody's different, but for me, and I've gotten to where now I've been doing this so long that I'm comfortable in front of smaller groups too. But for the longest time, for me, it was way easier to speak in front of a large number of people than a really small number of people. And I had a very practical reason for that. When you're in front of hundreds or thousands, not you don't feel everybody's eyeballs just searing into you like you do in a little small room. So, but I know everybody's different. Yeah, the open air, I had a couple of different types of things that I did that I had those opportunities. One was I worked for a ministry that was a very large international ministry, and part of my job was the promotion of books. I'll date myself a little bit, but even CDs and even cassette tapes early on, that kind of stuff. And so it was my job to get up in front of these crowds, which varied in size from back in those days. A small crowd was probably about 10,000. And the biggest crowd I think I got in front of to do promo stuff was about 250,000. So we're talking, big crowds. But that was to promote things. And so what I learned, and this is not my phrase at all. You've probably heard it a million times, but there was and I want to credit Zig Ziglar, but I'm not sure who said it first, but it was that facts tell, stories sell. And so, in that kind of a setting, when you got that many people out there, I just tried to grab their attention very quickly by telling a story about the product, not just facts about it. And that was one key, I think, as far as talking in front of that kind of a group. But the other open air that I'd done is I actually did some talks. One in particular was in Uganda. So I had an interpreter. And for any of your listeners, if you've never, had a speaking engagement with an interpreter, it's a very different experience. You have to account for a lot of things. But, for example, it's just this simple. Let's say you're given 30 minutes. Well, you can't just give your typical 30-minute talk, because that person is going to repeat everything you say. So your 30-minute talk is an hour-long talk. So there's some adjustments you need to make, right? But I think what I found, this particular one, when we were outside and in the open air, you had people that were, this was Africa, and that particular day, it wasn't like they're all in seats or anything. They were kind of just standing all over the place. So, and I did have a microphone so that projected my voice, but you had to just be okay with, and I think this is a key to speaking in any environment, you had to just be okay with the fact that there was other stuff going on. Not everybody was necessarily focused on you. There's side conversations and even people walking around. And what I did was I focused on trying to just match the energy of my interpreter so that we just kind of looked like we were in sync. And then you just kind of pretend that everybody loves what you're saying, and you just go for it, and you give it your all, and you just trust that, there's people there that you were meant to reach, and the people who didn't listen, then it's okay. And, you don't walk away feeling like you're a failure.
Yeah, excellent. And did you put any humor? Because I've used interpreters just for courts in Poland, but never on a speaking situation. But I'm just curious, would you actually try to put humor in, or would just, when there's an interpreter, is that too touchy to see? Maybe this mightn't work because there's kind of a time lapse and everything.
Yeah, well, to be fair to that question, because there's other people you're going to have on your show, I'm sure going to answer that differently. I only used an interpreter a couple of different times, so I don't have a lot of experience with that, just a few occasions. So in those, I did not. And that's not because I don't think you should. It's just when you're inexperienced with that, and especially if, I only worked with that interpreter one time. Some of the people that I know that speak a lot with interpreters, they typically have one, maybe two at the most, people that they know really well, that they've worked with for a very long time. And so I think when you have that kind of a setup, it's very appropriate to use humor and be yourself. I did not, just because of the unfamiliarity. You don't want to, I may say something and they don't really know me, and it may not interpret very well. And so the last thing you want to do is let a really bad joke get misinterpreted and then it really lands wrong. So I steered clear of it in that environment. But I do love to interject humor, especially, even our conversation here, obviously part of our story is very heavy and it can be very emotional. And I don't steer away from that. I don't, I sometimes I get emotional when I'm talking about the story, sometimes less. I never know for sure when it's going to hit me. But I also try to have fun with it too, because there's especially when I get a chance to bring my son into what I'm talking about, and how he inspired me in many ways, that brings great joy to me too. So I do like to use humor for sure.
Excellent. And have you ever had situations where you'd have simultaneous translations? In other ways, sometimes there's like a box and the people are wearing earphones and they're listening, because I've seen that in a few events as well. Have you had situations like that?
Yeah, when I was doing the event promo stuff, that was pretty common. And so again, it's kind of the same thing. You have to be yourself. I know that's going to sound like a broken record, but I think any form of speaking you're doing, no matter what it is, whether it's a stage announcement, whether I've emceed events for nonprofits and things like that. I've done the speaking engagements, it's me. I've joined conferences, stuff like that. They're all different. But I think you always need to come back to just being real and being yourself. And so with those environments, I just tried to just be myself, even though I had no clue if it was even being translated properly. Because you don't know, right?
No
Especially
idea.
the ones like you just described. I know in Japan one time, they all had the headsets in. I mean, everybody did. So you're just kind of trusting that whatever you're saying is being translated properly, because you have no idea. And I think, Roy, that's a great question too, because I think any speaker wants to be able to read your audience. That's something we all want to be able to do. But there are certain environments where there's such big cultural differences that you have to understand that they just respond very differently. And so, you know, uh, in Africa, for example, or certain parts of Central and South America that I've been in, they tend to be very demonstrative and excitable. And, you know, like in the church world, I was a pastor for 17 years. We call it the amen corner. Those are the people that as you're talking, they're like, oh, yes, yes, say it, say it. They're kind of joining with you. But then there's other ones like in Japan where, they're very stoic, and, you could be saying something that you're trying to get them all excited, and you're not going to really see much of a shift in their energy level physically, but that doesn't mean you're not communicating with them. And so again, you just kind of got to trust that there's cultural differences, and be okay with that, and don't expect them to, be like you.
Okay, excellent. So, like, with kind of all the different things that you're doing, I saw one of the things is be clear in what you kind of want in life. And you might just touch on that, because I think a lot of people are kind of struggling with that, especially in the last couple of years with the craziness that's going on around the world.
Yeah. Roy, I don't know what the real statistics are on that. There's a lot of different um, groups and organizations that have tried to do studies on just that. But what we do know for sure is that number is extremely high. Most people, and especially, even when I do some one-on-one coaching as well. And that's a question I like to ask, because it's important. Where do you really want to go? What do you really want? And most people can't answer it. The vast majority cannot answer it. And if I'm being, honest, which of course I'm going to be with you, you go back just shortly after Gabriel passed away, I was right there with anybody. And that's part of what happened, with his death, is it causes you to, or it did in our case, caused us to take a look at everything in our life, because when you lose a loved one, especially one so close to you, and, I mean, I've lost my parents. My parents both passed away pretty close to each other about 8 years ago, but they were in their 80s. That's a little bit of a different feeling than when you lose someone who's, just beginning to really live their life. But regardless of which one, it still just is so vivid to you that life is short, right? We all know it. We all say it. We all know we're not getting out of this thing alive, right? I mean, none of us are getting out of this human experience alive. At some point, it's going to end, right? And so that was part of what happened. And so I even have a chapter in my book about what do you really want, because that's what I was going through. I didn't know, Roy, and I had to sit down, and not just once. And I'm still doing it to some degree, because, as you experience new things and you try new things, even what you want kind of shifts a little bit. But I think the foundation point that you've got to start with, or at least that I like to start with, is who do you want to be first? To me, that's really important. I've been asked on a lot of these interviews, who is Clint Hatton? Well, I used to answer that question like most people. I would rattle off my accomplishments, right? My job titles and my accomplishments. And so I think one of the important keys to finding out what you really want about life is, what kind of person do you want to be? And so that's what I started with. I began to really look at, okay, who have I become? What kind of an impact have I really had on this world, on the people around me? When I'm in a room, whatever it is, casually with friends, or if it's professionally, do I leave the room and they're better off for the interaction? Those types of things. I just became more intentional about doing that. And, if I could say it this way, having a good energy when I'm talking with people, and, recognizing that their story is so important. That's really where I started for me with what I want to do, because that's how I want to be known. That's how I want to make people feel. Then I think you can get into, okay, so what's that going to look like? Am I going to do it through multiple podcasts like you are? And you may do some other things too. That's all I know right now, is that you have multiple podcasts. And look, that's amazing. You're helping people in so many different realms too. That's amazing to me. So what do you really want? You've got to sit down. You've got to take some time. I think journaling, writing stuff out, is a really healthy tool. I think it can help you. And there's so many ways to do that. Some people like something called a mind map. If you're listening, you don't know what that is, or if you're watching, that's just simply you start writing down different ideas and thoughts, and you can circle and draw lines. And, it looks a little more chaotic, but you're just dumping all your thoughts onto a piece of paper. Other people just like to create simple lists or whatever. But I think first, who do you want to become? And then second, okay, now what am I gifted at? What are the things I want to do? And that's what we started to do. And that's ultimately why I even wrote the book when I did, because I had thought about writing a book for probably 20 years and just didn't have the courage to do it. And I decided I want to be an author. The only way that's going to happen is if I begin to put pen to paper, right? I need to actually do it. And so the same is true with some of the other stuff I'm doing as well. What about with you? I'm really curious, because you asked me, about, how do you deal with what you want out of life? You have some really varied interests. How did you come about that decision in terms of which ones, like, okay, this is what I'm really going to do these things?
I think it's being conscious of everything that I do. And like, prior to our call, we were talking about kind of health coffee, and, you had your green drink and everything. So like, the health and fitness affects everything. Because like, how can you be, a parent? How can you be a good husband? How can you be everything? And everything is kind of, it all links up. You can't just be fantastic in one thing. Because I mean, especially coaching, you see somebody, they can be a fantastic businessman, but they don't even know their kids' best friends or anything about them. And it's kind of putting everything. And it's, for me, it's like researching everything. I love reading, and just the things that I do. So I make sure everything I do, the people I'm around, like, before I would tiptoe around if somebody was sucking my energy, and now I just cut the ties. It's like, I don't, it's like you mentioned, we're on the air for a certain time. I mean, hopefully 150 years plus, based on us,
come on,
based on all the health stuff that we're learning. But you don't want to be kind of around people that's taking that time away. And like, I am a person that's doing lists. I've tried all different things, but I do it. My lists are podcast, business, life, Like I'm doing, I don't know if you heard of Life book, but it was like a thing I've been doing for years. It was like the Wheel of Life. You know, that you look at financial, you have to look at everything, because it's kind of, at one stage I was with, say, finances, I was living off previous deals, and then something would go wrong and you think you've 2 or 3 years and it disappears over. And it's kind of, you have to put your energy into all of them, really. You can't just kind of hope for the best and think it'll knock into place. Not saying that everything is ideal, but I'm in a fantastic place and I work towards it. And, you know, brilliant relationship in my kid and parents, and just working on everything. Like, I know there's been a few things that have happened over the years and there's nothing you can change about it, but it's just that I'm a better person now than I was in my 40s. You know, the next decade, you know, that I hope to be even way better and look back and go,
Absolutely.
I don't know that old guy. And it's just never to just park up and, yeah, I'm grand, no, I'm done. No, it's like, you're never done. You always have to improve and help others as well along the journey.
Absolutely. Gosh, if I could, I want to, you don't need me to endorse anything you just said, but you said something I'm so passionate about, and I think is such a powerful thing. And I wrote about it in the book. The chapter is actually titled Parasites and Boundaries, but it's all about who you surround yourself with. Because I totally agree with you. You know, we're on a journey, right? And to your point, gosh, I hope I'm not the same. I'm 57 now. I hope at 58, but even 60, you know, that I've grown. I'm a better person. You know, I'm certainly more than I was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. But the only reason that can happen is who you allow into your inner circle and who are the major voices in your life, you know, and there's no question about it. And I was the same way, you know, because I think especially when you're someone that loves to help people, you can be even more susceptible to, there's a bunch of people that come into your life and you think you're positioned to help them. And at the end of the day, all they really do is they end up take. They just take from you. And that's why I called it parasites. They just kind of suck your life out and have no value for you, really. And so to your listeners, gosh, that's something you've got to take a look at. You know, Jim Rohn, who's a pretty famous motivational guy.
I love Jim Rohn. I've got so many books belong to. He says it beautifully. He's got a way with words, like, and he was in one of the nutrition MLMs as well.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. Yeah.
He was,
yeah. So, you know, he's famous, and now I hope I don't misquote him now, but he basically said, you know, you are the product of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And so, you know, you've got to take a look at that. And that was part of, you know, I think it fits everything we're talking about, even speaking. You know, if you surround yourself constantly around negative people who have negative self-talk and are critics and are always saying, you know, negative things and don't really care for and value other people, I don't care how much you try, that's going to come out, right, in what you say, because that's what you're taking in all the time. But we did that, you know, that was part of that. What do you want? What do we really want? So we actually began to look at the different relationships in our life and how much time that we spent with certain individuals in certain situations. In some cases, it wasn't even necessarily individuals. It was stuff that we were doing, even in a business standpoint. It's like, why are we doing that? That doesn't bring us any joy. The interactions we're having don't bring us any energy or excitement. Stop. Let's just stop, you know? So man, that was such a great point. And I think that it deserved to be emphasized because it's a critical thing if you're going to be a lifelong learner and grow, and especially if you have a heart to serve people.
And you mentioned you're 57. You look fantastic for 57, but especially the journey that you said you went, because, you know, it could have easily turned a different way with the, you know, the drugs and everything. So now, you know, just like as we discussed earlier, you're taking your green juices and everything. And it's like you're conscious and you're giving love to your body, because you have to look after yourself first, then you can serve all the others around you. And I think by, you know, because with the negativity, like it's like when you do good for people, I mean, you're doing good and you have a mission and you're just like, you know, you even said it earlier. It wasn't about, oh, get on the stage and do this. It was like you want to impact the person that they know themselves. Hey, I can do this myself, which is, you know, when you see somebody that can actually do that, it's rewarding in itself. You know, it's beautiful. Like, so I commend you on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And, the health thing you're talking about is critical too. Again, even with the speaking side of things, if you're not taking care of your body, then you're going to be a lesser version of yourself. You can't be fooled by that, and we're discovering now too, we're very much into, health and fitness all the way. I don't just drink green drinks. I work out 6 days a week. We have certain types of routines we do. And I don't think there's one type of routine. So I'm not even going to say what I do because that doesn't matter. It's different for everybody. But we consistently move our bodies and work out. And, as you probably know, I'm sure you probably have even had guests on the show. There's a ton of brain science out now that absolutely make it clear that moving your body and working out and eating healthy is the best thing you can do for your brain. It's not just about looking better, it's about functioning at a high level. So those are important keys.
No, absolutely. And I mean, just for those that kind of, if they go to a doctor and they're told to take medication, the first thing you should do is go to a gym and just start eating healthy and get out and start meeting nice people. Because if you actually take a few layers off, everything has been a lie, and all the figures that they're giving you is a lie. And what you do is listen to your body, listen to your intuition. And once you start doing these things, you go, wow, I feel great. And you start, because like I was never going to a gym. I used to play squash and stuff like that, but I never actually went to a gym because it wasn't kind of my thing. And I put on a few pounds during the craziness, and I was like, because I was how I saw it. I was speaking in Mind Valley on the stage, and I saw the pictures, and I was like, God, look at this. It was like a stone, but it was like, for me, that's a lot, because I've always kind of looked after myself. So I joined the gym, and I was kind of paranoid, and it's like, I actually love it now. I know I go 3 times a week. And it's like, I do different things. I do a few of the exercise, but I do running and cycling. And it's like, some people fear going to a gym because maybe it's like the fear of public speaking. But the reality is everybody's going in there on their own. There's very few, maybe 5% or less go in with somebody. So don't worry about that and just go in there. And once you start doing, plus you get to meet people as well. But once you start doing that, your brain you just start feeling so much better. To the point where you start actually looking forward to it. And then the cravings for the junk food disappear. And there's a big knock-on effect, which then makes you a better person in career, financial, family, the whole lot. Absolutely.
We all know that our habits dictate our lives, right? The type of habits that we practice. And, if we're, I'm sure we're reaching somebody out there, depending on when they're listening to this, that has been debating whether or not they need to go. Let me just jump on Roy's bandwagon here. Go do it. When I see people that, like, January just hit, right? So there was a whole bunch of new folks at the gym. There always is, in January. But I look around sometimes, and, I've been doing this for quite a while. So for my age, I'm pretty fit. But then I'll see people that come in that were where I was a few years ago, because I had let myself go for a little bit too. And I'm just so proud of them and so excited for them that they're doing it, and I do think you're right. Sometimes we look around, and I mean, even though I feel like I'm pretty fit right now, I still look around to certain guys. I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy's fit. You're going to do that, but do it for yourself. Do it for your family. Do it to feel good. Do it to live a long life.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finally then, with the kind of the social media, because I mean, you've got all the, obviously the book and the different thing. What's your what do you feel is the best one? Or do you think you need to be on, 6 or 7 of the different platforms, the TikTok, the YouTube, the whole shebang?
Right. There's a lot of different trains of thought on that, right? I mean, I am not what I would call a social media expert. My talks and different things I post, you're not going to see, 5 easy steps on how to go from 10 people to 1 million on Instagram in 6 months. That's just not my thing. But I've done enough research. I think what we're finding is if you're a coach or you have certain kinds of businesses, podcasts, obviously a massively growing industry. I think it's important that you probably have several platforms, because you just never know who's going to be attracted to what you're doing. But I think one thing that's definitely important is you may have one or two where obviously you have a greater following, and you need to pay attention to that, obviously. So you need to make darn sure you're being pretty I'll just give you a simple example. I have a Twitter account. I just never got excited about Twitter. I've had it for years. But then once I started doing this, I still throw out some posts out there, even though I don't spend a lot of time on it, just because it doesn't take very much time. And I just never know who might resonate with the mission of what I'm doing with Big Bold Brave, So I go ahead and do it. But I think one of the things I plan on doing, Roy, to your question as well, is when that's not your expertise, one of my next steps is going to be hiring somebody just to handle that stuff in the posting, because for some of us, that's just time consuming. And there's a creative genius to that as well. And some people are just really great at it. And you have to recognize when you're not. And I don't think I'm that great. All the stuff you've seen that's really cool that I put out there, it's not because I created it. It's because I got someone to help me, right? So, but anyway, I think, I'm on several platforms because you just never know where it's going to land, but you definitely got to know which are the ones that are really landing and make sure you're feeding that, right?
Perfect. Listen, Clint, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, the best way, kind of one-stop shopping, if I could say it that way, is my website is BigBoldBrave.us. And yes, I know those sticklers out there, it's actually .us, but I chose us for the reason I gave early in this conversation. It's about collaboration. It's about us together. So if you go to BigBoldBrave.us, you'll be able to find out everything you want to know. You can get connected. I have a new newsletter I'm doing every Friday, really brief, just some free content to add value to your life. The book's on there, speaking's on there, all that stuff. You can check that out. I do want to point out real quick, Roy, as far as the book goes, though, if you're here in the United States, you can order it through the website. You can order it anywhere books are sold. But if you live outside the US, just because of how crazy shipping has become nowadays, you'll want to go to Amazon or whoever your favorite online retailer is.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll make sure I put the website both on the audio and the video. Thank you very much, Clint.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find my other podcast as well as the coaching on bio.link/podcaster. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends. Until next week, take care.